Move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, Colin. I mean, we talk about him every day. Nick Sirianni opens his mouth and says something. The latest thing he said that it was moderately interesting at the Combine, he essentially said, I don't want to call plays. I'm not an OC. I'm a head coach. So that's why Sean Mannion is here. He's going to be the first-time play caller taking over for Patullo. Sirianni is excited about Mannion's scheme because he is friendly with, knows McVay and Shanahan. Colin, I'll believe it when I see it. If Sirianni's job is on the line and this ain't working, he's going to take over play calling midseason.
Well, he's not good at it. Sean Payton is relinquishing the play calling this year because Davis Webb, the young, the sharp former player, and Sean Payton didn't believe Lombardi could be that guy. So it's Davis Webb is going to take it over. I don't think coaches should be play callers. I think Lincoln Riley, Lane Kiffin, some of the guys at the college level are simply, there's nobody else out there better than them. Like, I get an offensive coach saying, like Kyle Shanahan, I'm a better play caller than anybody else on the planet, so I'm not relinquishing it. That's why, if you notice with the Niners, they're as good as their defensive coordinator. Like with Saleh, Kyle has total trust to hand it over to Robert Saleh, but they've missed on a couple of their DC hires, and you've seen what's happened to the team. So Shanahan, when you do call plays, it is more overwhelming. It's pretty daunting experience. But I don't think like Kyle Shanahan or Lincoln Riley, who are you going to get that's better to run your offense? So I think it's a dilemma. Sean Payton's been doing it forever because Sean Payton's great at it.
Yeah.
It is genuinely amusing. I find myself wishing with every fiber of my being that this particular discourse had emerged prior to Sean Payton stepping back from his play-calling duties. The reason being, Colin has spent an inordinate amount of time criticizing Nick Sirianni, and by extension Dan Campbell, for being overly dependent on their coordinators. The core of the critique has always been that they don't manage the plays themselves. This philosophy underpins the entire rationale for why we elevate figures like Sean Payton, Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, and Kyle Shanahan, doesn't it? It's the very justification for even contemplating a Mike McDaniel for a head coaching position. Even if you harbor reservations about his overall team management capabilities, you find yourself admitting, but the man understands offensive football. He is an exceptional play caller. That's the fundamental premise. This is why a coach like Clint Kubiak becomes a hot commodity. Not necessarily to serve as the head coach, but to orchestrate the offense. The same principle applied to Ben Johnson. The widespread desire to hire him wasn't rooted in a belief that he would deliver rousing speeches or master all the ancillary duties of a head coach. No, the singular appeal was his prowess as a play caller. The expectation was for him to command the offense, nurture the quarterback, and perform magic with someone like Caleb Williams. That is the crux of the matter. This has been a recurring theme in our discussions for several years now. Honestly, the emphasis on that specific skill set has become paramount. However, a fascinating paradox emerges when you consider two of the very coaches Colin holds in high regard, Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. Neither of them will be calling their own plays. And Sean Payton's decision isn't a casual one. It's a significant shift. I plan to address that in a separate discussion, so this won't devolve into a Denver Broncos analysis. My focus is intended for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll deliberately set aside the Broncos conversation for now, because if I start down that path, I'll get caught up in an extended rant. Besides, I'm genuinely interested in hearing Colin's perspective on that specific matter. I've seen the clip referenced, a fleeting image at the bottom of the screen, but I haven't had the chance to view it properly. I'd prefer to hear his exact words before launching into another tirade of my own. On a personal level, I must admit, I find a greater sense of security when the head coach is the principal architect of the offense. Let's be somewhat imprecise with our terminology for a moment. Nick Sirianni holds the title of head coach, not offensive coordinator. I recall a segment from Greg Olson, and locating the exact clip would be too time-consuming. But he articulated the advantages of the walk-around CEO head coach model exceptionally well. He mapped out the benefits of being detached from play calling, allowing one to focus on broader team dynamics, game management, and overseeing practice reps. There are numerous details and aspects of the team that demand attention, and he did a masterful job of illuminating those points. He really did. Yet, that persistent feeling remains, doesn't it? Consider the dynamic when a coach specializes in one side of the ball. With Mike McDonald, I can look at his defense and ask, how do you neutralize Stafford? How do you contain Drake May? When they succeed, I can attribute it directly to him. Look at that defensive unit he constructed. Similarly, with Sean McDermott, the focus is, you need to find a way to slow down Bo Nix or contain Patrick Mahomes. The target is clear. The responsibility is yours. This is your defense. Conversely, with a head coach like Nick Sirianni, when the offensive engine sputtered, the immediate reaction was to look toward Kevin Patullo. The questions were directed at him. And when the problems persisted, the sentiment became, well, Sirianni needs to rectify this. But his method of rectification appears to be hiring a different person. That leads one to question, okay, and then what? What is your specific contribution? Where do you inject your unique value? Now let's be clear. There is undeniable value in the non-X's and O's aspects of coaching. I emphasize this frequently. The ability to manage a roster, structure effective practices, and cultivate a winning mentality is critical. There is a multitude of responsibilities a head coach handles beyond the tactical whiteboard. However, speaking purely for my own preference, I am most at ease when the individual in charge possesses the direct solutions to the problems that manifest on the field. I find greater comfort in knowing that Sean McVay is the one calling the shots, because I can attribute the success or failure directly to his scheme. Let's project this forward with Sirianni and the Eagles. Suppose Kellen Moore and this Eagles offense achieve something extraordinary this upcoming year. Let's take it to an extreme, as extremes often provide the clearest illustration. Imagine Kellen Moore orchestrates a historically dominant offense. They average 35 points per game without fail. They finish the season undefeated and capture the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts has never performed at this level, posting astronomical numbers, 50 total touchdowns, 5,000 passing yards, and an 80% completion rate. It's mind-boggling. A.J. Brown surpasses 2,000 receiving yards, and Devonta Smith does the same. It's an unbelievable scenario. Now, in this hypothetical, Kellen Moore is promptly hired away for a head coaching vacancy, say, by the Washington Commanders, who have moved on from Dan Quinn. The Eagles, in turn, promote someone else, perhaps a coach from within, like someone from the Lombardi coaching tree. You're left looking at the new offensive brains of the operation and thinking, I'm not so sure about this. I have serious doubts. This illustrates the inherent difficulty. It's a precarious position. And consider Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers. I am incredibly high on Harbaugh. I admire the culture he instills and his overall impact. Yet, it's undeniably intriguing that his solution for the offense is to hire someone universally regarded as an elite offensive mind, a coach in the mold of Mike McDaniel. Doesn't that, to some extent, diminish the perceived value of what Harbaugh himself brings to the table offensively? It opens up a very interesting line of conversation. This is why the Sean Payton situation warrants its own separate discussion. I firmly believe Sean Payton was the primary driving force behind the significant personnel decisions in Denver over the past few years, moving on from Russell Wilson, drafting Bo Nix, and doubling down on defense in the offseason. I'm convinced he was the engine behind those moves. But then you have a general manager like Howie Roseman in Philadelphia. He is unequivocally the engine of those personnel decisions. I find it difficult to imagine Nick Sirianni being the sole proponent behind acquiring Saquon Barkley or making the aggressive move for A.J. Brown. I just don't see it. This leads me to wonder, and I'm not predicting this will happen, but I question the possibility of a future where roles become more clearly defined, fostering a mutual respect that borders on equality. Imagine a scenario where an offensive coordinator possesses significant power and is genuinely regarded as a legitimate coach in his own right, not merely a subordinate. A situation where the praise isn't solely directed at the head coach. Could we have a Dan Campbell and a Ben Johnson coexist for an extended period? What if, the moment Kellen Moore finds success in Philadelphia, he isn't immediately poached for a head coaching job elsewhere? What if the dynamic shifts to, no, I'm staying here for the next 5 years because I'm compensated like a head coach. I receive immense respect, and I'm recognized as a vital, almost equal component of this coaching staff, not just someone beneath Sirianni. It's probably an unlikely scenario, but it's worth contemplating. The reality is, there's a constant influx of new coaching talent. Every time a Ben Johnson or a Sean McVay type gets hired, we wonder if we'll ever see another great mind emerge. And then, boom, someone like Mike LaFleur appears, or Kellen Moore, or Clint Kubiak. It's a continuous cycle. This constant emergence of younger, offensive-minded coaches is becoming more and more prevalent. Unless they begin to consistently struggle as head coaches, proving they understand offense and quarterback play but can't manage the other facets, leading to more situations like Mike McDaniel or even Josh McDaniels, it's a challenge keeping all the McDaniels, McDonald's, and McDonald's straight. I think this trend will persist. Unless failure becomes a consistent pattern, any team with a great coordinator is likely to lose them. You then have to find another, and the success rate isn't guaranteed. As Colin himself pointed out when discussing the 49ers' search for defensive coordinators, sometimes you swing and miss. Can you really expect a 100% success rate with every hire? You cannot. The reality in the NFL is that these situations often become quite binary. You either hit a home run, a grand slam, or you don't. The Eagles are a perfect case study. When they hit, they go to the Super Bowl. When they miss, fans are left wishing for anyone else. The stakes are simply too high. I am confident that if Kellen Moore proves to be a phenomenal coach, and you don't even need to take my extreme undefeated example, if this offense is simply humming, performing at a high level, and we're all saying Jalen Hurts has never looked better, a vast majority of Eagles fans will be clamoring to keep him. I believe many Eagles fans received a crash course in this reality when they lost Shane Steichen. I wouldn't necessarily call him the earliest example, but I think his departure served as a significant lesson for a lot of NFL fans. Die-hard fans, casual fans, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but those who aren't as deeply entrenched, they got a tangible sense of the impact. And we've seen other examples on the defensive side of the ball as well. It places a team in a somewhat tricky spot, and navigating it is a complex challenge. I certainly don't have the definitive answer. Returning to that extreme hypothetical, Kellen Moore's offense is undefeated, puts up 50 touchdowns, and wins the Super Bowl. What do? Do you fire Nick Sirianni and promote Moore? Many would argue you can't do that. But the reality is, businesses outside of sports make these kinds of moves all the time. It's a common occurrence. If it becomes abundantly clear that someone in a lower position was the true driver of success, the one who cracked the code, drove sales, and took the company public, that person gets promoted. The former head of the department might be told, "Mike, you're no longer the VP of sales. You're out, or you're being demoted. The board could vote you out. You might keep your stock, but you're no longer running the company." That happens frequently. It's not unheard of. But in the world of sports, that kind of direct, business-like demotion or restructuring feels almost taboo. Think about it. I've touched on this before regarding the Bears, and I'll use them as a final example. When the Bears fired their head coach, I can't believe his name is escaping me right now, the one before Matt Eberflus, there was a strong rationale to believe he was actually an excellent defensive coach. Despite his struggles with the Dallas Cowboys, that roster had its issues. But if you genuinely believed in his defensive acumen and he'd done a competent job in Chicago, a typical business approach might be, "All right, we promoted you to head coach, and it didn't work out. We still value your expertise. We want you to return to being our defensive coordinator. We're going to give the offensive coordinator a shot as head coach." That sequence of events isn't abnormal in the corporate world, whether it's a blue-collar industry or a tech company. It's not uncommon to say, "We promoted you, you weren't ready, so we're moving you back to your previous role." It's rarely as black and white as a complete termination. But that's simply not how it works in football. It's not how the NFL operates. The more we witness the tangible consequences of having a legitimate, great head coach who also calls the plays, the one who is truly immersed in every tactical detail, the more I believe the model of the CEO-type coach, the Dan Campbells, the Sean Paytons, now that he's given up play calling, and the Jim Harbaughs might eventually be phased out. I genuinely believe that. Consider the alternative scenarios. What if the Chargers' offense looks absolutely elite this year? Greg Roman will have to receive immense credit. Then, what happens when Roman eventually leaves? The example works regardless of the team. Whether it's the Eagles or the Chargers, the question is the same. What about the Broncos? If Bo Nix looks phenomenal and the offense is firing on all cylinders, and everyone is attributing it to the offensive coordinator, you're left thinking, Are we going to lose this guy simply because Sean Payton is the head coach? It almost makes you wonder if Payton should transition into more of a front office role, like a head of football operations. He wouldn't be the on-field coach anymore. It's reminiscent of what happened with the Boston Celtics. Their coach was so successful that he transitioned to a front office GM role, handing the coaching reins to someone else. In many ways, it's what the Milwaukee Bucks attempted to do with Doc Rivers and Adrian Griffin. I just wonder, if you truly believe in Sean Payton's overall vision, could he remain the ultimate authority, the boss of the head coach, without being the one running the team day to day or calling the plays? It raises the question of whether there's another evolutionary step for these coaching figures, or if the status quo simply persists until they age out of the league. Eventually, it's goodbye to Andy Reid, goodbye to Sean Payton, goodbye to Jim Harbaugh. The argument becomes, yes, you brought a great culture. Yes, you instilled intensity and attention to detail. But at the end of the day, I need someone who knows how to call the plays right now, in this moment. If there's a younger, less experienced coach who can do it at a higher level right now, my hands are tied. So, I'm left pondering. Just ask yourself this one question. If Kellen Moore proves to be a fantastic offensive coordinator and does great things with the Eagles this season, would the Eagles have been a better team last season if they had him instead? To me, that thought experiment provides your answer. It potentially highlights a perceived lack of tangible on-field value that a non-play calling head coach brings to the table. And if that's the case, the ultimate question becomes, is retaining that head coach worth the inevitable loss of the coordinator who has a direct, measurable impact on winning and losing? Those are simply my reflections on the matter. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspective. What do you all make of the situation in Philadelphia with Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore? How are you interpreting this ongoing conversation? It's incredibly fascinating. The fact that Sean Payton is relinquishing his play-calling duties has seemingly opened a new door. Now you hear Colin suggesting that maybe head coaches shouldn't call plays. That's a departure from the message he's consistently delivered for as long as I've been following him. I'm not sure what to make of that contradiction. It's a notable shift. It's perfectly acceptable to change your opinion or evolve your viewpoint. But if that's the case, then what was the fundamental issue with Nick Sirianni? Why the persistent criticism about him being beholden to his coordinators? That was the narrative throughout last season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, whether you're in agreement with me or not. Let's spark some discussion, maybe even a little debate. But most importantly, let's have some fun with it. And please, do consider subscribing to the channel. We're cultivating an amazing community here, and I would genuinely love to have you as a part of it. My goal is to build something we all feel a genuine connection to, something we're excited to be involved in. I believe we're well on our way to achieving that. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It genuinely helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you all so much. I'll see you in the next one.